just to kind of set the scene a little bit and give you a little bit about myself. So, like I say, my name is Ryan Fitzgibbon. I am the head of DoubleClick search in EMEA. So it means I'm at Google, but also means I have this kind of side sort of team that kind of works on this third-party tool that enables you to actually activate your search on not just Google, but the likes of our friends at Bing and Yahoo Japan and Baidu and everywhere else. But I am based in London, but from my remit basically means I end up traveling everywhere. So in terms of keep things really kind of on a nice timeline, essentially I was born 6 years before the World Wide Web. I think that's kind of how we should judge ourselves now, kind of not BC or sort of AD, it should all be sort of year 6 BW, or another way I like to think of it is 13 years before Google. Then basically in between there, some things happened, and then ultimately started working in paid search in 2007. So I have, previously to working in Google, I was a search practitioner in a media agency based out of London. So for, like many of you in this room, I have been a search practitioner and still really consider myself a search practitioner, however much I kind of move more into the tech side of things. And basically, I joined DoubleClick Search at Google in 2014. I still maintain they hired me to stop me asking questions. But basically, that means I'm in this great sort of position to be able to talk to our customers across all the verticals, across all these markets with their subtle variations, and kind of really get to the crux of, what is the challenges you face day to day? Like, what is the work that you're doing that's causing you pain, or you kind of just say, it's taking me too long for very little impact? And that's really where we really focus with the technology side of things, is to try and solve those problems that you face day to day. And then that leads me to today, quite literally today, being able to talk to this amazing crowd. And I'm glad to see so many of you managed to last the entire day. And so when I kind of talk about those challenges you face day to day, I think it's really easy to forget how complex things have become. So sticking with the timeline, thinking about 2000, basically that's when AdWords launched. So it's not actually that long ago, although I suppose 17 years is for many of us a very long time. But the reality is, during those first sort of 7 or 8 years, I mean, I was struggling when building this slide to actually find the number of real, like, tangible launches that AdWords made during those first 7 years. I mean, they described like the content network launched, but it was basically you had to pick the websites. It wasn't like the free-flowing sort of targeting options that you have today. And even things like editor and basically quality score, the very fundamental basics that we think of today, didn't actually really arrive until sort of 2005, 2006, 2007. But since I kind of started working in paid search in 2007, it was really easy, just keywords, bids, ads, done. The manual aspect of it was manageable. Even at that point, people were talking about automation and Google launched Conversion Optimizer, but the reality was it was really straightforward and you could get away with just doing everything manually. Then I think about the last 10 years, and that's just some of the stuff that was easily findable in terms of launches that have been made from the Google products in AdWords. And the reality is you go, okay, at some point you have to just stop and admit that this is getting a bit beyond what is reasonable to be managed manually. There's just too many options, too many formats, too many considerations. You need a way of trying to scale that. And that's what we have been hearing a lot about today. And to me, those early days were very much along the lines of really just get stuck in that old way of working and just not really realizing that things were moving forwards and that you had to change your behaviors and how you interacted with the technology. And even when you then go, right, these last sort of 10 years with all of these advanced features, you're essentially in a world where you have this advanced technology in your hands, but you're not really using it for the purpose. I really like that sketch. But so we look at where we are, and it really, like I say, goes full circle to everything we've been hearing today. Basically, I've been hearing sort of very grouped themes, and one of them is data. It's Big data, small data. Thankfully, I don't hear the word big data thrown around too much anymore. I think it's too much one of those buzzwords. And the reality is there's a lot more power in the small data. Then there's the technology, the artificial intelligence, the machine learning, all of these automation tools. It's great. But there was one thing missing from all of these presentations, from those that I could understand because they weren't in Dutch. And that's you, the people, the actual day-to-day search practitioners. And I do hear this a lot, sort of people getting concerned that there's all this data and this technology and it's replacing the human aspect of marketing. And basically what I want to kind of go through today is some of the reasons why I think that that's not true. It's not true that, I suppose it is true that you've got these automation tools coming through and they're there to make your marketing work harder and better and faster and save you time and effort. But to me, that's just time you reinvest into more high-value, high-impact areas. So where we think about these areas merging. So from a data perspective, we've been hearing about unlocking the full potential of RLSAs using Google Analytics and moving towards audiences in a keyword-based world. And absolutely, there's this great data and there's a vast amount of it, and we should be utilizing it and we should be doing that. But then separately, we then look at the technology and go, the technology's there. We're hearing about moving from mobile first to AI first. We've been hearing constantly about the automation of search. But really, technology is useless without the data, and data is completely useless without the technology. So that kind of brings us to the very first sort of interaction of the two circles, as I see it, and really like where we're talking about utilizing the power of automation and machine learning to drive performance at scale. So when I do talk about big data, and we talk about these data signals and trying to make the right decisions as to where the right bid for the right keyword for the right person at the right time, et cetera, with all of these options, it's very easy to forget the size and the scale of that. So, for example, I know within our DoubleClick search technologies, and it would be true of other technologies as well, is that when you actually combine all of these signals, for every individual keyword, you could potentially build out hundreds of billions of combinations of signals. And for us, we're updating those models every 5 minutes. That's just something that becomes impossible to do as a human. You can't consider like comparing all of these combinations of data and going, where's the correlation? How do I understand that a signal of a performance from my shopping campaign is going to have a knock-on to my conversion rate of my search keywords? And that's really where the power of machine learning is coming in. And for many people that are scared or potentially have used automation tools in the past and it hasn't gone to plan, I was certainly one of those people. I just have to look 3-4 years ago, tested tool after tool after tool to try and do automation, and time again, they just didn't really work. Volumes dropped off, or my CPA or return on investment kind of went really badly. So it's very tempting to just have that view today and say, automation, tried it, didn't work. The reality is, even from the earlier talks today, talking about like Google Voice and the Translate, and just saying really the last 9 months or so have seen a fundamental shift in the power of those tools. And the same is true within search. So certainly within the Google platforms and the Google tools, so within AdWords or within DoubleClick Search, the last sort of 18 months to 2 years has really seen a huge drive in innovation in terms of being able to make automation work right, work better than you could do by optimizing your core keywords. So for me, like, it is a real case of trying to go away and say, let's give this one another try. But then, okay, everything's automated. What's my role? So for many people that work for their brands directly, it's a case of, maybe you don't want to take the idea to the wider marketing team and say, I'm going to automate all of this, because that just seems like the easy way out, and you want to prove that you're providing the value directly yourself. Or in certain cases, I hear from many of our agency partners that they simply say, well, what are our clients paying us for? That's what we sell. We sell like how smart we are as people and how amazing we are at getting results for your search marketing campaigns. And that's all absolutely true. But the idea here is to say, don't let the technology just go completely wild. The best technology is where you can actually feed information into it and control it in the right way. So when I think about the people and the day-to-day tasks, there is a level of human insight that you want to be able to provide the system to be able to drive that performance. And two of the real ones I tend to think of is where an automation system just simply can't really cater for right now is, first is the business decision. Quite often, marketing budgets come down and they say you have X amount of euros to spend in search, and it's not often logical. It's just somebody's written an Excel sheet that just goes, here's your budget, take it or leave it. You can't really kind of argue for more. Sometimes it's kind of, you kind of go, well, we can actually really drive performance if we just had like 10%, 20%, 100% more budget. And quite often, sometimes the business will come back and say, you know what, the volumes aren't quite where we wanted it to be this quarter, so can we just drive like the volumes up and take a short-term hit on the CPAs or the ROIs? And that's very commonplace, and that's not something a machine would understand. That's happening out in the real world, just kind of having these business logics that you need to try and factor in, and that's where you have that sort of control to make sure you're informing the system as to how to optimize. And the other one is real-world content and real-world context. In terms of, are you running a promotion? Are you running a promotion on specific products? Are you running a percentage off sale? Are you running a buy one, get one free sale? Are you running out-of-home activity? Are you running TV campaign? Are you running a national radio campaign? There's a lot of this wider context that you know is going to have a knock-on effect of your paid search performance in terms of both the impressions and the clicks that your activity drives, but also in terms of conversion rates. To say, I know when I'm having a promotion, my performance is going up. And that's data you have that you would want to feed into the system to make the system work harder for your activity. It's not completely automated. You need to be giving the information to the system. And so when I think about what that does is then it kind of compares two sets of day-to-day tasks. For me, bucket A, and this is the one that's very familiar to a lot of you, I hope. You're downloading data, you're running Excel reports, you're SQR mining for both positive and negative keywords, you're reviewing your top 50 keywords or so, maybe on a daily basis, and saying maybe I should increase or decrease the bids. The nightmare of promotions going live at midnight on Saturday. Okay, right now I have to think about updating all my ad copy and scheduling everything to go live. Or a price point has changed in one of my items, and now I have to go and review that and change it across all my different markets and across Google and Bing. That's not really where the time is worth spending. It's a lot of time-consuming tasks with very low value at the end of the day in terms of actually driving that performance forwards. For me, bucket B is where I'd rather spend my time. And I certainly think from an agency, that's where your clients would respect you to be spending your time. In terms of identifying those audience opportunities, like mining through GA for RLSA lists, etc. Being able to do more statistical ad copy analysis to not just say, I'm just going to throw it and let it optimize. I'm going to actually understand the subtle differences. And with things like ad customizers, that becomes easier and easier. But again, that's not something you just want to automate. You need to kind of derive some insight and understanding from that. But then also starting to think about other areas of other channels. Display, social, wherever you're running activity, you want to understand the interaction between those channels, as well as online to offline. And being able to get the surface data from a CRM system to expand your customer match lists in AdWords. And basically all of this sort of information is the stuff that it sounds better than download data. But the reality is that's where the value lies. It's probably as, if not more, time-consuming than bucket A, which is maybe why people have a tendency to stick with A, because it is somewhat less time-consuming. But the impact is so much higher on part B. So for me, automation is purely about driving the ability to do bucket A at scale faster to free up the time to do bucket B over a longer period of time. So when we look at this interaction between the people and technology, to me, it is about using a unified stack, unifying your data, having a single view of a customer, having the tools to scale what you would do manually at a much faster pace. But then brings you into 3 areas that I think what you're looking for in a good technology. The first one is control. Being able to determine and set the aspects of what you do and do not want to automate. So you may be in a situation where you say, I've got hundreds of thousands of keywords, please feel free to automate the keywords, but I have a very specific mobile strategy that I do not want the mobile bid adjustments completely automated based on my data because I know that my mobile is driving a lot more value than is being reported in my data. And so in the interim, whilst it's hard to get a lot of the data from what's actually happening on mobile into your search campaigns, don't automate my mobile activity for me. However, my audience lists, feel free, optimize those based on performance, and again, sort of maybe for locations, start automating that. That's absolutely fine. But that's the aspects you want. You want that control to have a way of determining what does and does not get done for you. And the other one that I personally am quite passionate about is around that transparency. I think historically, even with AdWords, that was an area where people had concern. I can turn on the automated thing, but now everything's just grayed out, and now it's just Google is optimizing its own bids to drive performance. And you can see what comes out at the end in terms of saying, yes, I'm actually quite happy with the performance, and that's the big win and the ultimate goal. But at the same time, you go, I really wish I could understand what's going on here. What is happening on mobile relative to desktop? What are the audience lists performing relative to people outside the lists? And that's where I feel like, certainly within a DoubleClick search perspective, but within some of the better technology platforms, is it does surface that insight. It does let you track the history of every bid change and say, on an individual keyword, it's gone from bid X to bid Y, and these are the reasons why. And then the last one is flexibility. And where it's very easy to say, I'm trying to optimize for a conversion, or I'm trying to optimize for a revenue. I can almost guarantee I could ask anyone in this room what is their definition of conversion, or what is their definition of revenue, and it would vary wildly. For some people, maybe in the automotive industry, it's not as clear-cut as buying something online, although I've started seeing some automotive clients starting to do that. But it may be you want downloading brochures, configuring a car, or booking a test drive. But each of those have different values to you. And certainly even within retail, it may be, you might be an online retailer only, but you start factoring in lifetime value and saying, you know what, new customers are worth a lot more to me than pre-existing customers, because I know they're going to just keep coming back. So I want to be able to rebalance the weight and say, let's start spending more towards the keywords that are driving new customers and spend less towards those that are driving returning customers. And it's a complete valid concern, and I think something that you need a technology is to be able to have that flexibility to build those formulas and combine those different goals and say, I've got my conversion pixels on the page, but then I've got my GA goals set up. So maybe it's bounce rates, or it's sessions, or it's page views. Everyone has a different goal, and that flexibility is really key. But again, you define that flexibility. You define the goals that you're trying to work towards. And then that brings an area which is a lot more abstract, and the potential is a lot higher. And that's the interaction between people and data. And the thing is, you have to own your data and start breaking down those silos and saying, what information do I have that is useful? And that is very much a two-way street. So it's not just people going to the data, but needing to get the data out to the people. And so where I think about the people putting in data, there's 3 kind of key areas for me in this area as well. The first one is context. So like I've been saying, like promotional activities. You've probably got a calendar in an Excel sheet somewhere that defines what sales you've got going on what dates, how does that link into your TV activity. Structure that data in the right way, and then you've got something that you could potentially utilize to start making smarter business decisions, or certainly in search. Then you have business data itself, and this is a very broad term. But you could say things around, do you have margins for your products? Do you have, for example, you may be a hotel chain and you've got information about all of your individual hotels, the star rating, the TripAdvisor score, the Booking.com rating, the average room rate, the number of rooms, the average occupancy level over the next 6 weeks. There's a lot of information that you've got there that when I'm talking about machine learning and hundreds of billions of signals, this is just even more signals that you can layer into the better technology platforms. You can say, let's provide this information, and then it's not a case of you saying, I know when my occupancy level is low or my average room rate is low, I should be increasing bids. You let the machine learning systems determine that for itself, and by constantly updating that data, it knows to react. So if you start becoming more competitive, it will start increasing bids without you having to set some blanket rule that just says, drive the spend up. And then lastly, it's around feeds. And I think for many of the retailers, very familiar with this, Google Merchant Center is obviously just this one huge bank of information. But the reality is, not everyone that is, everyone that's outside of the retail vertical may have very similar information about the products and services that they offer. They may be constantly adding new products or are constantly adding new services. And you want to be able to automate off the back of that, automate the campaign creation. So every time you add a new product, create a new campaign, ad group, keyword, ad copy, site links, specific for that product based off the information in the feed. And that's the sort of tools, the things you can do once you've got the right technology in place and you're utilizing that technology to its full potential to do what you would be doing manually. And then you have the output. So being able to pull information back that you would otherwise be kind of not taking the time to sit through and go through. I know there's been a lot of push from AdWords recently around the demographics data. Well, all of that data is sitting there. It's just waiting for you to kind of start analyzing it and saying, you know what, there's opportunities. An older demographic is converting at a higher rate than my lower demographic. Maybe I should be thinking about having differential bids there. Maybe I'm looking at my geolocations and saying, you know what, I could feed that into wider media because I can see that, the performance in The Hague is potentially much higher than it is in Amsterdam. So I should potentially shift some of my marketing budget to really focus on driving out of home in The Hague because it's potentially going to work better for me there based on the online consumer behavior. Then there are the opportunities around audience lists and surfacing up that opportunity by going and saying, let's have a look at how audiences are performing and then start thinking about, okay, what's the priorities? I've got thousands of list combinations I could potentially go away and create. What are the ones that are really going to make an impact? Use the data that you have and the audience segments that you have to determine the right audience lists. Get that right balance between a large enough size of audience that it's going to make a difference, but that you're focusing primarily on that differential performance. Who is showing really much higher conversion rates or really much lower conversion rates than the rest of their peer set? That's where you can then focus the time. And then the testing, like once you have this sort of data flowing freely to you, you can then start saying, well, let's test all the betas. Let's use that data to determine what is the correct formats to be using or the new betas that are working for us or aren't working for us. And that's really going to keep you ahead of the competition as well by making sure you're utilizing the opportunities that others are a bit slow to adopt. And then that brings, to me, like the perfect harmony where you get to that point right in the middle where you say, okay, so we've got the people, they're influencing the technology. You've got the technology feeding with the data that the people are providing. And there's just this constant flow back and forth between all three aspects of that. It's not just letting everything go. The people form an important part of that piece. And so you can drive that efficiency. You can really drive the time-saving stuff on every manual task that you have. But then also at the same time, you're driving effectiveness. So I'd rather be spending less time on the mundane stuff and driving efficiency and effectiveness than worrying too much about kind of, have I updated the ad copy correctly? So for me, there's three key questions that you can ask yourselves. First one is, how well do you currently use your technology? Most of the agencies and advertisers in this room will be using technology of sorts. Sometimes it may be a case of reviewing the technology. Sometimes it's a case of just going, look, we've got the right technology, but we only use it for a fraction of its power. We just go, you know, it's great, it helps us with our reporting. But, you know, is there testing that you could be doing? Is there automation that you could be doing just to kind of eke the extra value out of something you're already paying for? The second area is around how does data empower your colleagues to make the right decision? So are you working with the wider media channels? Are you working with the wider teams to say, what information do you have that you think will have an influence on our performance, and can we get that in a structured way, feed it into our systems and into our technology so it can make smarter decisions? And then, is that data powering your technology to be more efficient? Like, is your technology able to take that information and start saying, you know what, we know historically when you've got a sale going live, your conversion rate jumps by 5.5% for a particular category of products. Well, next time you're running a sale, we know to increase the bids to cater for that right before the sale goes live, so you do not miss that opportunity. Which then brings nicely onto the 3 key takeaways. Don't be scared of the technology and the automation. It has got a lot better, and I can promise that from first-hand experience, but you are in control. So it is a case of potentially there is human error still to be had. So it's not an ideal world, but you are in control of it. So there isn't really anything to fear. You should kind of just make sure you're really clear with what you're looking to achieve as your business goal, and then set the system up to do it. And if you need to put constraints in place to say, don't go above a certain bid, don't go below a certain bid, you can totally do that. The second one I'd say is start thinking internally for your businesses and say, what data do you have that could benefit search performance, and how can I start structuring that into a way that is meaningful in input and a way I can input into the machine learning systems or into my reporting. And then last is then to explore the data available to you, to start surfacing up the opportunities. It does mean potentially downloading data, so you're going back to the very first thing I said you're trying to move away from. But there is some value in that when it's the right sort of data you're downloading, when it's new data you've not taken the time to download and look at before, but instead you spent all the time just downloading data to put into an Excel sheet that you then do a VLOOKUP or a SUMIF function to make it look nice and then send it on to the client or to the CMO of the company. And I think for me that's kind of the real 3 key takeaways. And there is a harmony to be had, and that we shouldn't forget the search practitioners in the room, because you guys are the ones that are in control and making that difference. And I would end it there, but I will throw one more slide just at you to say we are transferring the power and giving it back to you, the people. And I can guarantee you nobody thought they'd see a Trump quote today and it'd be a positive thing. So thank you.